I am your host, Leah Demla, and you are listening to the Oracle on Purpose podcast, where we help intentional leaders clarify their purpose and next steps to create a work and life of significance. Hey friends, I have a question for you. How much do you trust your knower, your knowing, that part of you that is calling you to do something or make a decision or choose a direction in your life or your career? I want to share a little story. I'm actually here in Portland, Oregon, and I'm in the middle of a VIP weekend with a client. And we take a break to go kind of get some fresh air and go on a little excursion. And we ended up at the Portland Museum to see the Queen Nefertari, I have to say that slowly, Nefertari's exhibit. And as we were walking around in the outside of the exhibit, we're kind of getting ready to go inside, I noticed a woman across from me who's wearing a jacket. And on the back of the jacket, there's this strange black little cube of like foam attached to the back of her jacket, but it didn't look like it belonged. I wasn't certain, right? I wasn't certain, but a nudging inside me said, that's not supposed to be there. And I bet she doesn't know it's there. And if she doesn't, I bet she would appreciate someone saying, hey, you have something on your jacket. So I walked over and I tapped her on the shoulder. And sure enough, no, it wasn't supposed to be there. It was a piece of like a thing you use to kind of take hair off of your jacket that stuck to her jacket. And she didn't even know it was there. Now, I don't know how long it was there. I don't know whether she had left the house hours ago or just recently. But she simply, pulled it down, took it off, stuck it in her bag, and carried on. And even though this seems like a small moment, I want to pause and remind you, and it reminded me of the fact that when we don't follow that nudge, it's not just us, right? It's not just us that could possibly suffer. Now, for her, it might have just been a simple, a little bit of embarrassment if she got home later that day and found it there and thought, how did no one, and all the people that I saw today, how did no one stop me and say, you have something on your jacket? That moment is just such a little glimpse into how we can trust our knower or not. And what happens if we trust our own knowing or not. I could have continued to walk on, but the interesting thing was earlier at lunch, my client and I were talking about just this thing. What I love about the work that I get to do is that so often examples like that present themselves. And we have to take that, seize that opportunity as a learning moment and a teaching moment, which I'm hopefully doing now for some of you, which is to remind her and myself and anyone watching that's interested in this idea that the connection that we have, not just to our own knowing for our own sake, but to the greater collective. That's the purpose of the knowing, the purpose of the nudge that I received by first acknowledging that there was something off about the picture in front of me, but then also listening to my own inner knowing saying, that's not right. And I think I should say something. I should be the one. I should be the one to point it out. I should be the one. I should be the one. How many other times do you also follow the next block that can happen, right? It's going to be embarrassing. What if it is supposed to be on her jacket? Maybe it's some strange new accoutrement for her jacket. I don't know, right? So I could have been embarrassed. I could have felt foolish. Or I could also have taken another stance, which was somebody else will say something, right? That's another thing that happens when we don't follow our own knowing, is we think that everybody has the same knowing. What? We think that everyone has the same knowing as us, but it's so untrue. We have our own knowing for a reason. Now, could somebody else have seen her, the situation? Possibly. Could somebody else have tapped her on the shoulder? Possibly, right? Those are all probable moments that could have existed. But when we live in a place in ourselves where we're not trusting our knowing, and we are putting it off on others, right? Someone else to do it, someone else to step up or speak out or say that truth, we're forgetting that there's a reason it's coming through us. It's coming through us on purpose. You and I, whatever that influx of inspiration, idea, thought, desire, it's ours for a reason. It's ours, unique to us through us, right? So when we don't trust our own inner knowing, we are leaving a gap. At the very least, we're leaving a gap in the experience of the world. I know that seems really big and like, oh, maybe you think I'm being dramatic or overly dramatic. But the reality of it is we are all connected. We are all here to be here together. And everyone that you are around, that you're associating with, that you're in relationship with, right? And we're not talking about like a love relationship, but interconnected with, is counting on you. The universe is counting on you to show up and do your part. And sometimes that's, pointing out something that's not exactly right for someone else. And sometimes it's just being you, like speaking your own truth into an environment for that purpose, right? Not necessarily to convince other people, but to speak the truth that's coming through you so that it exists outside of you and in whatever the container is. And that was our conversation today. Like, how do we know? How do we know when it's time to trust? And the reality of it is, in my experience of kind of living this way for so many years, is it always is. Like, your knower is giving you insight for a reason. The thing that I think we have to start to become more comfortable with is not knowing, right? Not knowing necessarily what that reason is. And trusting that if it really does come up from inside of us naturally to have an idea, a thought, a desire, that there's a reason. And that's good enough. That there's an authentic part of us that's calling for us to step into something. And that's a good enough reason. And when we do, we have the chance to have something that everybody, so many people come to me for, right? And they're thinking about this, like when they're working with someone like me who helps people, as I do, with understanding what their purpose is and their path to their own prosperity, right? I say like, this is your divine path to millions. And when I say that, I mean, this is the road that is full of wealth and prosperity and flow for you because it's the most authentic you can be. And so when we talk about that, one of the things that people come to me with, kind of like that desire that they lead with sometimes, is the idea of making an impact. I want to make an impact. I want to make a bigger impact. I want to make a stronger impact, things like that. And the funny thing is, then you need to trust your knowing. You need to trust that when you are giving an inspired thought, idea, desire, or a nudge like that I received earlier, that's it. That's how it begins. In trusting our knowing as the right thing for us in that moment, right? Then we are leaning into the impact we're meant to make. When people ask that, what oftentimes they're really saying is, my impact should have some grandiose plaque on the wall expression that somebody can point to, like Nefertari, 3,000-4,000 years later and go, oh, he had this to say and it made this impact. And life isn't like that. Our lives right now, in every moment that we're in them, give us every opportunity to have a true impact, the impact that we're meant to have. It's not always going to come with trumpets blaring and plaques on the wall or whole museums full of your furniture and your picture and your, none of that necessarily comes from simple acts of impact. But being truly on purpose and intentional and present, and then following from that place to do what's next, that's where the biggest impact really comes. because it's constant and it's ever present. So my question remains, how good are you at trusting your own knowing? Because if you want to make a bigger impact in the world, that's a good place to start. All right. Thanks for watching. I'm Leah Dunlap, the Oracle on Purpose. I appreciate your time and energy in this space, being present with me. And I hope that this gives you something to think about when you start stepping forward into your own expression, and give you the permission or the engagement, or maybe even just a nudge, to trust your own knowing. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Oracle on Purpose show. If you found value in this episode, we'd appreciate you leaving a comment. Also, you can subscribe and ring the bell if you haven't yet. If you'd like to get clear on your highest vision and next steps, go to oracleonpurpose.com. See you next week.